Buying refurbished equipment online is always risky because you don't know the competence of the person that restored it. In this case, according to my client, this one came from Dr. Sony and it didn't work. And rather than send it back to him and spend a lot of money shipping it back and forth, he sent it to me to see what's wrong. So let's check it out. This is an SLVR1000 I had shipped in from a viewer. He just bought it. It was bought from, I think he said Dr. Sony in Pennsylvania, and it doesn't work. So rather than pay all kinds of money to ship it back to him, he shipped it to me to check out and see why it doesn't work. Needless to say, from what he told me what he paid for it, he paid a lot more than this unit is worth. I recently bought one of these for $50. Actually, I bought an SVO1000, but I got it for $25 actually. I bought an SVO1000 working and an SLVR5 non-working, $50 for the pair. So $25 a piece is what I paid for mine. Because these aren't worth what people think they're worth. I know people get upset when I say that, but I find them all the time dirt cheap. So if people are paying hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of dollars for units like this, all you gotta do is look around. You'll find them cheap eventually. You'll find them cheap. So let's see what's going on with this one. It says it's got no picture. Well, the guide's not broken. That's a good sign. Everything's freed up here. I've just pulled the top off it before I plugged it in, and we'll try it out now. You see there, if you remember my SVO1000, it has another board that goes across here for the time code. It's an editing machine, and it's got time code generators and so forth on it, which the consumer model, which is identical, doesn't have other than that. So let's plug this one in and see whether it gives me a picture. Alright, let's just see. Well, that doesn't look good. I'm getting a flashing blue picture on the screen here right now. Yeah, this is what I'm getting for a picture. So definitely there's a problem with this unit. I don't know whether it's damaged in shipping or what, but I have a sneaking suspicion that it was. This board has got a break in it right here. You can see where somebody has tried to repair that board. And that is where our problem is, folks. Watch this. I'll do this all in one shot. So the picture is okay now, and when I touch the board right in that area, so that's where the fault is, right there. I have my work cut out for me. I just have to repair somebody else's repair. The fault is also affecting off-air reception. This is the tuner. You see? So that's where our fault is going to be on this one. It's kind of a mess, isn't it? At least it'll be a relatively easy fix. Hopefully. I got to bridge over all of these traces that are damaged and try to bridge over them a little better than the last guy attempted, because it looks like he just dragged a soldering iron across there and didn't actually put any bond wires across it, which it really should have had. Might be that trace right there. I bet it's that one right there. Could be any of these though, but that one there looks particularly bad. Okay, let's warm up the soldering iron and see if I can fix this one. Okay, we can see the one that's broken right here, and the scope also shows me that it's this one. Got video there. Now I don't. When I push down, I have video. Now I don't. I'm looking at the scope. Video comes back at the same time. I go to the other side on here, and when there's no video on the screen, I have video on the scope. There's that one right there. Of course, now it's working. Anyway, it's one of these ones in here that's bad. Maybe that one right there. Yeah, you can see the crack right across here like that, and then again on this trace here. This trace doesn't have anything on it because over here it's not even connected to anything. That's a ground. And this is the ground here. So let's bridge the bad traces. To do this, first I'm going to wet the area with Flux so that I can clean the area up. Whoops, we'll put some Flux on here. And then I'll run my soldering iron over it with some solder and get the contacts nice and shiny. And then we're going to try and bridge some wires over it, some very fine wires. Camera's in the way when I'm doing this. Okay, let's see if I can do this one and be out of the way of the camera. This is how the last guy apparently just tried to fix this, and of course any shock on that board, they're going to open right up, which is exactly what happened. And now we use some fine wires. I've got some very fine wires. I'm going to dip them in Flux, and then try to bridge them over top of the brakes. Now, if you think you're going to be seeing me actually put the wires in place, unfortunately, I won't be able to show you that because I have to get my magnifiers on, and I'm going to be within only a couple of inches of the board myself. So there's just no possible way to get a shot from any camera angle. All you're going to see is my head in the shot. This next process took me about 2 hours to get this done, but I'll show you the progress as we go through it. This wire that I'm using is a single strand of copper wire out of an HDMI cable that had been damaged. Or it might have been an LVDS. I think it was LVDS actually from an old main board to a timing controller. But single strand out of the small conductors for an LVDS. It's almost impossible to see this so small. I gotta basically use the monitor and look on the monitor while I'm doing this. It's not really possible for me to show you as I'm doing this because I have to get my head right in there. There's no way to get a shot, but this is what I'm doing. I'm bridging a very, very thin wire. This came from an HDMI cable. This is a single strand from an HDMI, the actual conductor inside an HDMI cable. It's very, very fine wire, and I'm doing micro soldering and soldering it over the bridge. And we'll do the same for all the rest of these. And that's really the only way to repair a circuit board that's been damaged like this with a fracture, a hairline fracture. Just going over it with solder might hold up if you're not bouncing the thing around, but shipping the thing across the country, it would just open up again, which is, I'm sure, what happened. I'm trimming them off with a scalpel. So when I get the wire soldered in place like this, I just take my scalpel and just cut it with the scalpel and then move on to the next one. Like that, and then move on to the next one. Okay, I've now put bridge wires in place. I'm going to have to clean this up because I need to do a good visual inspection to make sure there's no bridges. I'm going to get a toothbrush and we'll use some alcohol and just clean the area of the repair up so that I can inspect it, make sure that there's no bridges before powering the unit up and seeing if my video is fixed. I'm probably, oh, one of them's come loose. I can see that already. So I have to fix those ones up, but once I get it clean, I'll be able to see if there's any that are loose and just tack down the ones that are loose here. So once I get the area clean, I'll go in there with the magnifiers again and look for any loose spots and then try to tack them down. And of course check for any bridges, because that's always a concern when you're dealing with traces that are this close together, is that you could get solder bridges quite easily if you're not exceptionally careful. Okay, I think I have it. Pretty sure I have this solved. I don't see any bridges there. I've just been inspecting it from different angles using different angles of light, and it looks like it's okay. Let's power the unit up and see whether I get a picture. And more importantly, does it flash when I touch it? I have a picture, and when I tap the board, it doesn't break up. Excellent. Okay, I would say that that board is repaired. Now what I need to do is I need to obviously support the board so that it doesn't damage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some epoxy on the bottom. I'm going to mix up some epoxy and stick it on the bottom of the board to give it some lateral strength so that vibrations won't damage it. I could probably also put some on the top of the board too, over top of these connections, just to prevent them, but I'm going to stick it on the bottom just to keep the board from developing any more breaks along there. I think probably what happened is someone was working on this thing and they lifted the board out and they grabbed it and it was still secured down, and you know, that's usually where they break, when people are a little bit too rough when they're opening them up. But this one here now has a picture on the tuner. Let's try playing back a tape and see whether I have a picture on playback. I should be working fine on playback now. And there it is. It's playing the tape. So that's excellent. So I'm just going to put some epoxy on the board to protect it. I'll just put some epoxy behind the board here, in this area behind it, just to add some extra strength to prevent that crack from opening up again. Even though it's got wires on it now bridging it, it's still a weak spot on the board. Okay, there it is playing a Super VHS tape. Better make sure it's got sound. It does. I'll kill that before we get any trouble. One other thing I've noticed on this one is, I just heard it, is the capstan bearing. Listen to this. So what happens on these Sonys is that the aluminum bends on this capstan bearing. They thought they fixed the problem by putting in this heavier duty one, but it never really fixed the problem. It just prolonged how long it took to happen. What causes it is the pressure from the spring. And over time, this bends. And anybody that knows anything, I mean, this came from, according to the guy that sent it to me, he bought it from Dr. Sony. Dr. Sony, you should be ashamed of yourself. You should know about this. Anybody that knows Sony VCRs knows about that problem. Well, what will eventually happen is, what's happening is the rotor is making contact with the stator every time it makes a rotation. And what will eventually happen is it'll actually start sticking, especially on LP or EP tapes, because the torque is a lot lower. It'll stick. It'll cause the picture to momentarily flash, 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 flash. And well, the fix at the time to repair this was to replace this housing, but you can't get the housings anymore. They haven't been available for a long time. So what we need to do on this is we need to actually straighten it a bit. So we'll do that. To straighten it, we're going to remove the capstan, or not the capstan, the pinch roller. So we're going to remove that screw and hold the tower gear in place while we remove the bracket and the pinch roller. We just need to get the pinch roller out of the way, because basically what I need to do is I need to get a pair of pliers and I need to bend this thing a little bit, basically back towards me, because it's bending this direction, so I need to bring it back towards me. So we just put a pair of pliers on here and we're just going to give this a little bit of a pull, just to try to straighten it a bit. Now we can put the pinch arm back on, put the bracket back on, and the screw back in place, and this should hopefully prevent this thing from making that sound if I bent it enough. I just give it a bit of a pull, which is what we got to do on these, just to give them a little more life. But that's a real common problem on all these Sony machines like this. And now, see, it doesn't do it when I push on it. You can push on it quite hard and it's not doing it. See, look at that. See, that fixes that. That's what you got to do on these. And anybody that's working on Sonys, that's the real common problem. If it's making that sound when you even just very, very light pressure on it, that's bending, and it will get worse. And when it gets to the point where it wears off the insulation on the coil, the coil will short and it'll blow the motor up. So it's something that you really do have to address. When these were readily available, we just changed out the upper bearing here. We took the motor out, 3 screws to hold the motor out, and then 3 screws hold this housing onto the motor. You pull the rotor off and remove the housing, and then put a new housing on. But again, I changed hundreds, maybe 1,000 of them, no, maybe 1,000, but definitely in the hundreds. It was something that was so common. SLVR5, SLVR757, SLV555, and the original ones, this was a copper color. This was a piece of copper, the top of the bearing, and then they changed it to aluminum. That was how we were supposed to differentiate between the newer style and the older style. Unfortunately, the newer style was more reliable than the original one because they made the metal on the back here, the ribs. The original one didn't have these extra ribs here that you see on the back, right? The original one, those were thinner, those ribs. They made these a little bit heavier on this one, but it still failed. So that's something that you got to keep in mind on these machines. And anybody that works on them that doesn't know this, I don't know, well, as I say, it was shoddy, okay? And it took me, what, all of 2 minutes to zero in on that. I looked at the board. That looks like someone's tried to fix that board. I put my finger on it and the picture kicked right in. Board's broken there. So now it's got a bit of epoxy on the back here that will shore this up so it shouldn't break again in that spot. And it's got jumper wires in place of it. So this one's fixed. This is probably, I'm not going to say this was an easy fix because the camera wasn't running for a lot of time, but I did spend a lot of time. I spent a couple of hours getting this done. So this was something that was quite involved, even though you guys didn't see me doing it because, and I had the, as you can see, I had the double magnifier on it, and I was in like literally like here. My head was down to here, and I had the soldering iron in here. So it was a really, really tedious work on this one. You have to be in that close when you're using that high magnification because your focal range for your eyes is only about 3 inches. Everything beyond 3 inches is blurry when you're using that high magnification. But anyway, it's fixed. It's working. It's playing a Super VHS tape just fine, as you can see. So this one is ready to go back, and the owner of this one will be very happy to get it, I'm sure. Anyway, thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye.